Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build. Luke, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, glad you're here. Excited to share your story. Where are you calling in from? Where's home base?
I'm in a town called Goodlettsville. It's greater Nashville, right north of Nashville, Tennessee.
Awesome. Have you experienced or seen like significant growth over the past few years? Because I hear about that. I don't know if that's true or
Yeah,
not.
I mean, I think the explosion happened before I got here.
Mm,
I was stationed at Fort Campbell, which is about an hour outside of Nashville in
mm,
2017, and so I lived in Clarksville, which is, similarly about an hour out. But yeah, I think the explosion of growth had already occurred at that point.
mm.
I mean, housing values and everything continue to go up here, so it's definitely it's a construction rich environment for sure.
Sure.
Target
Yeah.
rich environment, as I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. We're going to kick off with our first two questions. I know you're a recent dad, so congratulations for that. So this
Yeah.
will be a
Thank you.
funny
Thank you.
question for sure. This will be a funny question for you, which is if your son or future kids approach you, tell you they want to join service, what do you do? How do you react?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of, who I am as a person was because of going to West Point and then, serving afterwards. I would be very proud to have my children go and serve their country, but it's definitely something that he would have to choose. I don't think I'm
Mhm.
necessarily I'm trying my best not to push him, but I mean, he'll definitely be heavily influenced, I think, just by being adjacent to me,
Mhm.
but yeah, I think it's something that, if he were to choose it, I would be very proud.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. All right, so next question is culturally speaking, when a veteran joins the civilian workforce and vice versa, there's cultural gap that occurs. How do you see us better bridging that gap moving forward?
Better bridging the gap. I think, um, I think a lot of veterans are very solution oriented and
Mhm.
they want to leave the military, join a company and they see problems and they expect everybody to get on board and like, hey, there's a problem. We need to fix this. And I think there just needs to be a certain understanding of, not everybody, this is, when you're in the military, I mean, it is your life. Like that is a lot of times, whether good or bad, it's put, my job is first and my life. And a lot of people have that, but then you get out and it's not like that anymore. People might show up late to meetings and not have the same kind of drive that you're used to being surrounded by. And I think culturally, you can become a little bit, people can be a little intense coming out of the military and it doesn't, align necessarily with the civilian sector. So I think you just have to have a certain expectation or understanding when you leave that, not everybody's number one priority is their career. Um,
Mhm.
and a lot of people in the military, it really is. So I think that's one thing, just having expectations, understanding that, you may leave and you're going to see a lot of things that, you think you can improve and change, but, change is hard to implement, especially if you go to a large company and you just can't be frustrated when you see problems, you have good solutions and they don't necessarily take you up on them, and just know that you're there to be part of that new team and give as much value as you can and the culture that exists.
Mhm. Yeah, great answer. It's always really helpful. I mean, it certainly can't hurt is to set your expectation the best you can. And that's also a big reason why we have these conversations, right? Why I have the show is so that hopefully other service members or veterans can kind of hear these perspectives that you just brought out, so that when they join workforce, they'll be able at least to understand that there's a difference in that culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Luke, everyone starts off with an introduction. So I'm going to kick off with yours. Luke Dressman, sir, graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point in 2016 with a degree in systems engineering and went on to commission as an engineer officer. Luke spent most of his 5-year Army career as a combat engineer with the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell, including a combat deployment to Iraq. In his final year of service, Luke worked with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in Nashville, where he was first introduced to construction and government contracting. In 2022, Luke founded BR Systems, a commercial construction services company. What started with a small renovation projects has since grown into multi-million-dollar contracts across state governments, federal agencies, and private developers. This team leverages a unique mix of military leadership, self-performance, and proprietary project management systems to deliver at the highest level. Beyond business, Luke is an active member of his local veteran community, employing a majority of veteran staff, and is committed to service, leadership, and building organizations that make a lasting impact. Most importantly, Luke is a proud husband and father. All right, Luke, let's talk about where you grew up, what childhood was like.
Yeah, so I grew up, it was a town called Fort Thomas. It was essentially, so if you look at the map, the Ohio River splits downtown Cincinnati, Ohio, and then northern Kentucky. So it was a pretty unique geographic area where I could drive 20 minutes and be in farmland, or I could drive 5 minutes and be in downtown. I could be at the Red Stadium downtown. So um, not being of age to go downtown and participate. I actually spent most of my life, even though I was right next to Cincinnati, I didn't really go over there much. I spent most of it running around on the Kentucky side. But I was very blessed to have a really good public school there that had a very high excelling football program. So I got to start on 3 state championship football teams. Had a really good academic program that set me up for success going to West Point, and overall was actually very, very blessed to grow up where I did.
That's awesome. What I guess inspired you? I mean, you had mentioned being involved in sports, so I'm sure that had some forward impact. But other than sports, like what inspired you to start thinking about West Point and military in general?
Yeah, so my grandfather was drafted to Korea, and he hated every minute of being in the military. And I didn't really have a military influence in my family at all. What I did have was 2 parents that came from very large families, and the idea of giving your kids money or paying for their college was very unique to them. So they actually told me when I was in grade school, kind of trying to motivate me to work hard in school, like, hey, you don't have to go to college, but just know that if you do, you better figure out a way to pay for it to get a scholarship, because we're not going to pay for your college. And so that was a very motivational to me. And my dad actually told me about West Point. And at the time, he literally was like, hey, there's this really cool place called West Point. It's military academy. You don't even have to pay if you get in. It's free. And so, believe it or not, that was the motivation. As I got older, I learned more about it. And then in high school, being part of a very high excelling team of, as a football team. I mean, we lost 1 game in 3 years, and we played varsity football, and we won state championship every year. And it was a good taste of what you can achieve when everybody's rowing in the same direction and being part of the team. So, I'm not, I'm right under 6 foot. I'm not, was not gifted enough to go and play D1 football, but I definitely had a yearning to continue having that team environment and challenging myself physically and mentally. Following high school. So it was still attractive to me. And I think, at the time I just wanted to be successful, and I knew that West Point was going to be difficult. It was going to be challenging. And it would give me the tools I needed to be successful. And the military was more of an afterthought. But once I got in, I definitely drank the Kool-Aid and really got committed to what I was doing while I was there.
Yeah, sure. So how did you, I guess, start to learn or understand requirements to get into West Point?
I think, the specifics I didn't really get into as much. I mean, I just knew, right, make good grades, be good extracurriculars, basically any university system, right, that's going to look good. The specifics of it were probably about junior year. Actually, they did a thing called Summer Leadership Seminar that I went to, and got to spend a couple weeks at West Point over the summer. And, they kind of coach you up a little bit on, hey, these are some things that you can do. This is what they're looking for, what leadership really means. And, but yeah, I mean, I think ultimately the process was just getting on the website and pulling out, you need this medical stuff, you need this. And it was a process for sure. And it was difficult. I mean, my parents definitely helped me get through it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, I think it was just a matter of researching. But at the time, I just knew, hey, stay out of trouble, make good grades, work hard, and that'll set conditions for you then go do the heavy administrative burden of
Mhm.
getting in.
Yeah, no, that's awesome to hear that you didn't have any like intrinsic, whether it was like family or close friends, or maybe you did, but you didn't, in terms of friends, you didn't mention, but um, to have that kind of like motivation at a young age to know and strive toward West Point, especially even that you visited it, knowing kind of what it would be like, which is not easy. I mean, it's not an easy program.
Yeah, it's funny. I think back a lot. I reflect a lot on, where my life has ended up versus, a lot of the people I grew up with are, not necessarily doing great. A lot of drug influence in the area that I was.
Mm,
I know a lot of people that are no longer here, have OD'd on drugs, and kids that I grew up with, they're good friends with, right? Middle school, grade school. So, reflecting on how things ended up so differently. I mean, I think the biggest superpower that I had was I always had a vision for what I wanted for the future. So, I mean, I think it's hard enough to make the right decisions in life to get to where you want to go. But if you don't know where you're trying to go, it's almost impossible to make the right decision. So, one
mm,
thing, without knowing exactly, I never really believed I'd actually get into West Point. I think I put it on such a
mm.
pedestal, because nobody around me had ever, I didn't have anybody that I could relate to, that had done something like that. And I think just knowing, hey, this is something that I want to do, it just drove better decision making as a young man. And
Sure.
young men do a lot of stupid things, and I just made sure I didn't get in trouble because this was something. And had I not had that goal, I probably would have gotten in a lot more trouble.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
I
Yeah.
think that's a huge differentiator between me and a lot of the guys I grew up with, that
Yeah.
did get that did get in a lot of trouble. So.
Yeah, certainly. I would agree. I mean, it sounds like that is the differentiator. How do you think you came around to striving toward that, especially if like the environment you were in wasn't necessarily inclined to do so?
I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know.
you don't
It's
know.
a good question. Again, one that I think about, why I think like that. I mean, I think, yeah, it could just be an intrinsic thing. It
Yeah.
certainly is, aligns with being an entrepreneur, right? Having
Mm,
vision, and, I see, what I want the future of my company to be right now. And, um, when I was young, I used to daydream all the time. I remember I'd get in trouble in grade school for daydreaming. So I may have always just been like this, but definitely, I've always been a very forward thinking person, and what caused that, environmentally, I really don't know.
yeah. I mean, I think it's cool you make the I guess like string through life to where you're at today and just the entrepreneurial attitude. I would certainly agree that, in hindsight reflection, you can see it's a trait, I guess, which pushed you in that direction. So that's cool. So talk to us a little bit about, I guess, starting at West Point, or even just the application process of getting in, right? Like what was that feeling like for you?
Yeah, it was, one of the big differences between going to West Point versus a normal universities, or even a ROTC program or anything like that, is you have to get a congressional nomination.
Hmm.
So not only do you have to be accepted by the school, which is, very difficult, but you also have to get one of five nominations. So any congressman can have up to five, persons at any academy at one time.
Hmm.
So, it was Jeff Davis was my representative at the time. He was actually a West Point grad.
Oh, nice.
So it was a pretty hard interview. I mean, he came in, he had basically a team of people that would interview and ask questions. And I remember the day before my interview, it was on a Saturday. That was a Friday. I had a season-ending, PCL tear, in football the day before. So of course, I think it actually relieved a lot of the stress of it, because I was thinking, like, even if I get this, I don't even know if my knee's going to be able to, make it
Hmm.
through, their version of basic training and everything else. So, um, but it actually gave me a good story to basically go in and say, because at the time it was, one of the things they asked was, can you tell us a story that will demonstrate your leadership potential? And I talked about the fact that, I tore my knee, and I, despite having all of my, the favorite thing that I have right now in life is playing football. It's who I am, is, very much how I identified, as a football player. And that was over. And, I went in the locker room, they told me, your knee's torn. And I went right back outside and basically started, coaching the guy that filled in for me and
Mhm.
helping him get aligned and making sure that we won the game. And it was just a matter of, and I remember telling them that story, and I think it resonated with them, but it was me there, on crutches at the time,
Yeah.
telling them this, I took 10 minutes to feel sorry for myself. And then I got out there and I helped the team win.
Wow.
Still, even
Yeah.
though I didn't have anything else to, I couldn't physically contribute anymore. So
Yeah. That crazy timing. And that's also, I mean, definitely as a kid, that's pretty amazing story to hear. So yeah, I can see why I can see why you got
yeah.
the designation there.
But I also,
Cool.
the funny thing is, I also went, right next door. They had the Naval Academy interviews, and I did that one too because I was just kind of casting a wide net. And
Sure.
they brought me into a blank map of the Middle East, and they said fill in the countries, and I did absolutely terribly. So I quickly got a taste of. I don't think I did quite as well on that side, but anyway.
Yeah, that's a tough one to be put on the spot with.
So,
So talk to us about getting accepted. You know what that feeling was like, and kind of moving forward from there.
yeah, they sent a very large kind of like appointment document to, hey, you've been accepted. My parents called me and they're like, hey, we got a package. We think this could be an appointment. You need to get home. And I was just running around somewhere at the time, and I got home and we opened it up and there it was. And at that point, I knew, okay, like here we go. And I think it was definitely exciting. It was very exciting, but um, I was scared. I was scared. Like I said, it was something that I didn't have anybody to look at
Mhm.
and say, hey, somebody like me has gone and done this. So I think part of it was also just a sobering realization of, man, my life is going to be extremely different um, than it would have otherwise been. So
Mhm.
it took a minute to sink in, but yeah, I mean, I think the whole first year of going through West Point, I was a little bit definitely numb to everything that was going on. Like it was just a whirlwind of new experiences. So
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about that first year. I mean, I know it's like I mean, obviously it's a huge shift from being a high school kid to now being first year in West Point. Walk us
yeah,
through that.
I think I was not a very conscientious person, so I didn't do very well in the beginning. I had a lot to learn. Done things like we would be on the third story of the barracks and we'd go down and we'd be all marching out and I'd realize, oh, I don't have my PC in my pocket. I don't have my cover to put on my head. Like dumb stuff like I was really bad in the beginning. And no military experience. I think it was a rough start, but I was good learner, so I picked it up. And but the other thing was they stuck while you're going through this process, they would come in at various times and say, hey, if you want to test into this advanced class or test into this advanced class, come take this test. So I would take these tests, but one was, hey, if you think that you're going to struggle here, and of course I had put West Point on such a pedestal, I didn't mean, I still wasn't even sure I belonged there. So
Mhm.
like, hey, if you think you're going to struggle, you should come take what's essentially like the West Point like special ed class where they help you, get organized and try to set you up for success with studies. And I went there and not to sound arrogant, but I kind of looked around and I was just realized like, man, I don't think I need to be in here. I ended up doing very well academically there, but it just kind of shows like where my head was when I first got there. Like,
Mhm.
I don't belong here. Like these are, a different caliber of person than what I am. And I think, over time you just get more and more evidence of, okay,
Mhm.
I can do this. I can be successful here. And then, um, I think one thing the military does is it thrusts you into a lot of situations that are unfamiliar to you, and when you continuously have success, that just becomes data points for you to then try
Mhm.
and take more risk later in life. And I think it's very conducive to be an entrepreneur later in life. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely agree. Well said. And I can also imagine that a lot of, kids starting their first year in West Point had a similar kind of attitude or mentality around it. The allure of West Point, you finally get in and then you get thrown into the whirlwind. So I'm sure that's pretty frequent in terms of thought. What was like one of the hardest, one to few things in that first year for you, like in particular?
Yeah, I think everybody struggles at something because you're taking, you've got the military side, you've got a physical side, you've got the academic side.
Hmm.
And in academics, I mean, there's not one person that gets through us. It doesn't matter what your major is. I mean, the core curriculum there without even picking your major is very difficult.
Hmm.
Um, so academics are very challenging, and to me that was something that I very much focused on. Studying engineering there too. Engineering is pretty difficult at West Point. So I put a lot of my energy towards that. But on the physical side, I mean, you have to pass every class. Like there's no failing class. So everybody has to take survival swimming. Everybody takes a class called military movement, which is essentially gymnastics class. Everybody has to do a boxing, combatives, different classes. So I did pretty well in most of them, but I am not a gymnast by any means. So that was actually my lowest grade at West Point. I fought tooth and nail to get a C minus, and it was my lowest grade I got. But I would say that was difficult. And then
Hmm.
I think just time management. I think
Yeah.
I've always been a little bit of a procrastinator here and there. So I had a lot of late nights, keeping up because I did want to make good grades. So I'd do what I
Hmm.
had to do, but sometimes I'd start later than I needed to. And, lack of sleep and everything else, that was hard. I mean, there would be it seemed like all the assignments would hit it in like these, 1 to 2 week periods. So there'd be some weeks where, I was pulling 1 to 2 all-nighters a week. And then when you're not sleeping, it's hard to control your emotions and you're getting depressed and everything else and then all of a sudden you forgot to shine your shoes and then you're getting, more of your time taken away to be punished for whatever you messed up. And like a lot of stuff can snowball. So,
Hmm.
um, I think time management is one of the things that's very difficult there.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. So at what point did you kind of decide on your trajectory, whether that was, major or, whatever, studies you were doing? And I'm not
Yes.
sure where exactly like your, like, I don't know, understanding of MOS comes in that picture as well.
Um, well, at West Point so I picked my major sophomore year. So system
Hmm.
engineering was something I'd never heard of actually. System engineering is not available at every university. I think it's, more engineer centric schools and Ivy League schools have it, but not every school has system engineering.
Hmm.
It's kind of I think it came out in like the 1970s, but it's a sort of a, general engineering, but it's more of a problem solving process that you learn. So I took some,
Yeah.
mechanical engineering, some civil engineering, some electrical engineering, and then system engineering specific classes. But they really just kind of give you a general base of knowledge in engineering. But I just thought it was very difficult, and I put a lot of work into it. So I was actually leaning more towards infantry for a lot of my time there. That's what I wanted to branch, and also your class rank at West Point kind of dictates your branch and where you're
Hmm.
posted. So if you're top of your class, you're probably gonna be flying helicopters in Italy. And if you're bottom of your class, you're gonna be doing chem corps at Fort Polk, Louisiana, right? Like that's
Hmm.
kind of the way it works. So it's not like a random draw. It really is. It's you get priority based on your class rank.
Hmm.
But my senior year, I think I was just so you know, had put so much time into being an engineer, I realized, I knew that, by branching engineers, you could potentially get placed underneath of a professional engineer. So there's a lot of professional engineers that are in the Army. They get their PE
Hmm.
while they're still in the Army. And if they're in your chain of command, you can actually list them as experience, right? And I was thinking, well, I'll probably do engineering when I get out. And I've done all this work. I could really accelerate my career after the military by potentially getting experience while still in the Army. So that's ultimately what drove my decision to be an engineer in the Army. Um, but then I got in and I did mostly combat engineering, did no construction until the very end. So it didn't quite work out that way anyway. But yeah, that's what really made me decide to pick engineering over infantry.
Yeah, cool. Cool. I think systems engineering is an awesome degree because I mean, it's really applicable to everything and it's a great mindset to have. So great program. Um, I also understand like during the summers, you have opportunity to do pretty unique things. Do you have any, recollection of anything that, you'd like to share over summers?
Yeah. So one thing you do, they have, you can basically do a sort of an internship, right? You go
Hmm.
work at a company. I got to do two of them, so I had two different summers. But the summer going into my senior year, I had done really well in a particular class. I got the highest grade in a class everybody took. It was called Systems Dynamics, and the instructor there, your senior year, you do a capstone. So he wanted me to lead his capstone team because I did in his class, And so he's like, hey, we're going to send you on this internship. Your goal for this 3-week period. So I got to go to Orlando, where the Army Simulation Center is, at University of Central Florida, worked there and basically spent 3 weeks designing a capstone program that then, I came back and I had a couple of classmates that joined me and we did this capstone, but it was called early synthetic prototyping, but essentially it was building a simulation to simulate whatever problems that the Army was having. So a couple of our use cases were like basically going to war in a mega city, going to war in like deep cave compounds. And the idea was basically crowdsourcing solutions by creating a video game where we like design a cave and allow people to like figure out and develop technologies within the video game, and then creating little milestones and things that trigger like, hey, this person completed it in a certain amount of time. That feeds back to the Army. Then they go and look like, how did this person do it? So like anyone in the world could potentially be giving solutions to the Army. So that was the idea behind it. It wasn't my idea. It was it was somebody had already started working on it within the, it's called ARCIC. Don't ask me to tell you what that stands for. It was basically early kind of research into R&D efforts in the Army, but we just took it and kind of helped them develop that out.
Cool.
But it was, I think, just kind of helped, stimulate that entrepreneurial mindset, and was my, first experience of like, hey, this is something that like we just need to get results because this could actually get used in the real world. Like, it's not there's a difference between write this paper, do this assignment versus like, hey, build something that actually works and provides value for the military. And so it's a little bit different thought process than just doing schoolwork. So I thought that was a really cool experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. So at what point do you understand kind of where you're going next? Is it like literally when you graduate, or at some point during senior year, or some other time?
Yeah, I guess it's I think it's second semester senior year you get, well, I think first semester you get your branch, and then second semester you get your post, if I remember correctly. So I knew I was going to branch engineers, and I was going to Fort Campbell. And then and then the last thing you do is select your bullet dates. And so by the time I graduated, I kind of knew, okay, I was going to Fort Leonard Wood to do officer's basic course, and then I was going to, following that, go to Fort Campbell.
Cool. So what was graduating like for you?
I get myself in trouble on this one. I mean, it's definitely one of the best experiences of my life. I mean, I don't think I've ever felt that level of exhilaration, and it's so crazy when you're there. I mean, until I held that diploma in my hand, I don't think I was going to get out of there. I mean, I think like even the week before, I mean, anything could happen. So the week before graduation, I'm still like, until I had that diploma, I still remember standing at Mikey Stadium, looking at the diploma, and then my parents and my brothers had come, and my brothers had never been there. And I think it was like the first time that like I had the realization, like my family is starting to get a taste of what I just went through, because there's no way for them to know. They're so disconnected from everything I was going through. It was just really an incredible feeling. I mean, I think I was high on life for about 3 months following graduation. It was really, really cool time in my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great to hear it. It's an awesome accomplishment. So walk us through what your next step was like. I forgot. I'm sorry, I forgot the base. I know you just mentioned it, but I forgot the base name.
Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri. So that's where officer's basic was. It's Army training, so it was okay. I mean, it was kind of, you get babied a lot. You're kind of treated like you're a private in the Army while you're there. And they also take, they take everybody. So you've got the reserve officers, you got the, West Point officers, you got ROTC. Everybody's just mixed up, and to be frank, it's not the same caliber of being at surrounded by West Pointers. So it's the curriculum and everything was very easy. So I think going from such a high discipline constrained environment at West Point, where there's really I think some people had a lot of fun. I wasn't having a lot of fun there. To then go into I've got an apartment. I'm a single guy at Fort Leonard Wood. Really just, I had a lot of fun on that outside of the, training. And also there's never a time in your career as a officer where you're going to be surrounded by that many officers all in one
Hmm.
spot. So there's a bunch of people in the same position as me. Had a really good group of people there, and it did teach me a good lesson in life, because there's, they call it Fort Lost in the Woods, and it's because there's very little out there. And I still remember it's like one of my favorite places I ever lived. And I realized it's just because I had such a good community around me. I
Mm.
mean, we could go to any hole in the wall bar or anything like that and really enjoy ourselves. So it just taught me it's okay. It doesn't really matter where you live in life. It's really about, the people. When you plant your flagpole somewhere, it's like having a good community around you. You're going to enjoy where you live if you've got good people with you.
Hmm. Yeah. It almost feels like, I don't know, the first year, or really even just the entire experience of West Point should like put you in a stage after basic, considering basic is like trying to accomplish what the first year is, right, of being at
Mm-hmm.
West Point at a, you know, like you said, it's a more general kind of approach. So less overall quality you'd expect. So it's a funny thing that, West Point grads end up just integrating right into basic.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, I'm not going to sit here and argue that every West Pointer is the greatest officer or anything like that. I think it's good that everybody gets mixed up, but um, yeah, I think a lot of the best officers I've met in the military were ROTC. They were not from West Point, so it's definitely not, it's not the rule, but there's definitely an advantage, I think, coming from West
Right.
Point. I mean, you definitely get a great. I mean, just in general, I don't think there's another place on earth where there are more people dedicated to developing you as a
Yep.
leader of character than at the United States Military Academy. I mean, it's not like it's a bunch of professors that are there to do research and teaching as a side show. I mean, they are, most of them are military officers, and their sole purpose in life is to prepare you to go be an officer in the Army. And it's
Hmm.
really, as much as I hated being there, that was never lost on me. I always appreciate the fact that I had really good mentors and a lot of people to basically, ask questions and share experiences about, what's going to happen when you get into the military. So I definitely was prepared. I felt like
Yeah.
when I went into it.
Yeah. I mean, from the outside, that seems pretty obvious to comprehend and agree with. So after basic, what happens next? Where do you go from there?
Yeah, so I went to 1st Brigade. It was called 326 Brigade Engineer Battalion at the 101st. I was kind of waiting to get a platoon, so they stuck me in a logistics company within the Brigade Engineer Battalion. I don't think they actually exist anymore. I think they got rid of them, but you would have a mix of you would have a military intelligence company, a signal company, a like forward logistics company, and then two engineer companies and a headquarters company, which was also always led by an engineer officer. And then the battalion commander and the battalion command sergeant major would be both engineers. So kind of a unique unit. And yeah, I mean, I got to go be what they called the training officer. It wasn't a real job really, but I was essentially working directly for the executive officer there, and he was very good. And so I just got a crash course in like how logistics work
Hmm.
for the Army prior to becoming a sapper platoon leader after that, which was a great base of knowledge. Like how do you get your ammo? How do you get your, I'd
Sure.
seen the inside works. How do you get your vehicles fixed? And then the same people and relationships that I was working with were then the ones that were responsible for fixing my vehicles and
Right.
providing us with ammo. So I know exactly who to call and had relationships. So it was a great advantage as a platoon leader after that.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah,
At what
that was good. So,
Yeah. So at what point did you kind of like drill into the engineering specialty?
yeah, I think so I got, the battalion commander called me. We were at a training exercise at Fort Knox. And he called me up and said, hey, we've got a platoon, separate platoon that's going to be open. I want you to be the platoon leader. And I basically went in and, one thing that is unique, I think, about engineers, officers. So, I mean, I'll be the first to tell you, I think a lot of the best officers I ever met were infantry. I mean, you get all types of infantry. You get some really incredible officers there. But an infantry lieutenant is basically there to execute a training plan that's laid out in front of them, right? They
Hmm.
have certain tasks. Like they're going to run a range that has been ran a million times before and compare it against their peers on how well they run that range. And their job is to execute. But as an engineer officer, we had so many different tasks. I mean, it could be, laying obstacles, doing engagement area development, using a spider mine system, doing route clearance. We were sappers, so, clearing obstacles, but also, shoot, move, and communicate and everything else. So there wasn't like a set, training program. You couldn't be good at all. You couldn't be good at all, but you had to pick a couple things. So in a VEB as a SAP platoon leader, you're also given essentially a staff position in a infantry battalion. So I was attached to an infantry battalion while running my SAP platoon. So I just went to that battalion commander. I said, kind of laid out like, hey, here's all the stuff we can do. What is important to you? And he gave me his feedback, and then I got to actually just create the training, and then I would just pitch it to my company commander and be like, hey, we want to go do like door breaching, and then we're going to do obstacle emplacement and do these different trainings, but I had to come up with it, and it was all unique, right? It's trainings that had not necessarily been done before, so it was really, really cool experience that I thought was unique to be an engineer officer.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. So how long of the, I guess, timeline was that, what you just described?
I did 9 months as a platoon leader, and then then I went on staff after that, and very quickly we deployed. So I think I did. So at that point, I'm probably, I was made first lieutenant pretty quickly as a platoon leader, and then, I was basically a senior first lieutenant in the battalion when we deployed, and I was just in operations. And in the Army, they call it the 3 shop. It's kind of where lieutenants get stored, and it was just a timing thing where there was not a lot of lieutenant. I was the only lieutenant in the 3 shop. A lot of times there's like 10 of them in there waiting, and just timing things. So I got every extracurricular hat. I mean, I was the head of the FRG. I was the UMO, like moving us out. And I was the only operations lieutenant. So all the operations at the time was basically running through me. And then I had a very, very good captain that I worked underneath, and she was just an incredible mentor to me. And I mean, she's going to be a general someday. I think she was the #1 rated officer in every evaluation she ever had. And she taught me a lot about really, I mean, one thing I still take away from, even in my business today that I learned from her is having disciplined organization systems. So I know this will probably resonate with you with, knowledge management system and everything, but it's one thing to have a knowledge management system and a system for, organizing and conducting operations or project management or whatever you want to call it. But it's another thing to make sure that you fill in data points every single day and make sure that you keep track. And, she was very much a stickler of like, hey, here are our systems. Like every day you do not leave until we have recorded every bit of information every day. And then, you don't see the value of it until 7 months, something bad happens, and you got everything you need to go back and be like, okay, on this day we did this, and then this would happen or whatever. And in construction, that becomes very important, having a track record of everything that you did and when. But that's a lesson that I pulled out from that experience in operations. And then when we deployed, I was battle captain in Iraq, and we had a good relationship, and the battalion commander really had a lot of trust in me. So even though it was a captain's position at the time, she did it for the first month and a half. She was performing well. Once she realized, okay, Luke can take this, she actually got elevated to the acting S3 of the battalion. And I took over as the battle captain for the day-to-day operations while we were in Iraq. So it was very, very good experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it sounds like you had, that sounds like a good, almost perfect amount of time from getting out of basic to kind of, leading a platoon to learning what's what to then deploy versus like having finished basic and a month later deploying. Just, more knowledge and understanding of what's what. Walk us through what kind of the period right before deploying was like how are you preparing yourself? What was mindset? And then into deployment from there.
Yeah, I had met my now wife about 3 months before I deployed. So I think at the time it was, I was very excited. I mean, I think I'd put so much time into, practicing a game that, a lot of people never actually get to play, right? Like not
Mm-hmm.
everybody, we're not in an army today that everybody deploys in their career. So I was excited. I was excited to go, but just like anything, the unknown, I think I just had, the fear of the unknown of like, I don't know, are we going to be getting shot at every day, mortared every day?
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to be going on patrols every day? I had really no idea what we were going to be doing. And I don't think anybody really did. Even the people that had experience deploying, I mean, until you get there, you really don't know what the environment's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was just, definitely a lot of nerves. The day before we left, I had taken my dirt bike out and, it was just like prepping it to be stored. I took out the oil and just didn't want to just sit there and get old. And somebody stole it in the front yard. So I'm like filing a police report, and the police were taking forever to get to my house. And finally, I'm like, hey, like, don't worry about it. Like, I got to go put my bags. I'm going to Iraq. And so I never even finished filing the police report. But so kind of, that on top of like literally someone like backed up to my house. I mean, it's just very, very feeling of violation. It's just, I think my stress level at that point was pretty high. But
Sure.
Getting in there and getting theater, I mean, deployment was a really unique experience, and I'm sure we can talk about that. But I mean, I think it was just a lot of nerves, fear of the unknown.
Yeah, I mean, that's ridiculous. Like things you don't need to happen before you deploy.
Right.
Getting your vehicle stolen.
Right.
That's so ridiculous. So walk us through what deployment was like. You get there in Iraq, and kind of like what happens from there.
Yeah, so the environment when I was there, so under President Obama, like we kind of pulled out, partially, right? We lost a lot of influence, and prior to that, we were really forcing the Sunnis and Shias to work together within the government. Like we were kind of forcing, because the Sunnis were in power under Saddam. He gets ousted. The Shias are now the majority of the population and of the government, but I think we kind of forced a level. At least 30% of these positions are going to be held by Sunnis. But when we pulled out, I mean, Sunnis got pushed out and Iran came in. So it was a very, very interesting dynamic when I was there, because we were surrounded by essentially Iranian militias that the Iraqi government was paying, right? They were paying them because those Iranian militias were also the ones that fought back a lot of ISIS when ISIS took over a large portion of the country. And I was there in 2019, so it was really the remnants of ISIS is what we were fighting. But it was really, we kind of had our hands tied a lot. It was, we were supposed to be cooperating with the Iraqi government, and they didn't want to cooperate, right? They were, a lot of the leadership positions were held by people that actually had fought against Iraq in the Iran-Iraq war prior to. So it was very much, I mean, it's sad to say, all the efforts very much, Iran was heavily influencing the government while I was there. And so they didn't even want us leaving our base or anything like that. A lot of what we were doing was search and destroy missions on ISIS. So basically I would get a bunch of reports in the morning of, human intelligence here where we see ISIS. We would overlay it with our sensors that were kind of detecting where we saw movement in the mountains and that sort of thing. And then I would just set ISR, so like drone basically maps, and we would just search for people and caches and stuff like that with drones, and we'd find them. Then we'd call in airstrikes. That was a lot of what I did, really.
Yeah, so it sounds like more so leaned on the infantry side more so than the engineering side.
Yeah, I mean, so my battalion had we were engineers, but we had the entire province of Kirkuk. So we were everything. We were the infantry. We were the logistics. I mean, we didn't have any infantry there with us. So when we go on patrols, it was just our engineers. So yeah, I mean, you kind of wore all the hats while there was just our battle space. So
yeah. Did you know to expect that before, or this was just all like you get to Iraq and you're switching out whoever and they're telling you this is what's happening?
Yeah, like I said, I don't think anybody knew. So we got there, and as a unit, we were trying to figure out like what's our job here, like what are we doing?
Yeah.
I would say, we were, sometimes the stars align, and the team that I had with me was incredible. I mean, we had some really good intelligence officers. We had a really, really good intelligence contractor a guy that had basically been deployed for like the last 6 years. That was really good at finding bad guys, and he shared a lot of lessons learned with us. So we were very successful relative to the other units that were there with us. And he was a big part of that.
Yeah, good to hear it. Well, any like, I don't know, stories that come to mind, like in particular during that deployment?
There's one, and this I think has a lot of connection to really what I'm doing now. But government construction, well, anything, right? There's a lot of stakeholder management, and being a leader, right? You're always going to make decisions that people don't agree with. And I was a first lieutenant making life and death decisions sometimes. I had to make 50 decisions a day, and inevitably somebody in the theater of Iraq and Syria above me was not going to like that decision. So it was a very high stress environment. I'd make a decision and I would get 10 phone calls. 5 of them would be saying that's the greatest decision ever, and 5 would say that's a terrible decision. Why'd you do that? And what taught me was that you're not going to make everybody happy, but one thing you should do is always make a deliberate decision. So one thing I knew is, like, as soon as somebody would call me, hey, why'd you do this? I would spit out to them, hey, well, sir, I did it because of this, this, and this. And it would diffuse them, and they would say, okay, well, next time maybe you should consider this or whatever. But I had counterparts that didn't have that, and they really, really had a hard time. They would make decisions, and they'd be, well, I thought. I was like, what do you mean you thought? And just get torn up day after day. And I just knew, like, hey, and it's one of the things that I, with my company, I very much, don't micromanage my leaders, and I try to push decision making to the lowest level. And I tell them, say, hey, you're not going to make a decision that I agree with every time, but you better know why you made that decision and be very deliberate about it. That's ultimately what I care about. You better have a line of logic. Hey, this is what I know. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. You may be missing information or the logic may be flawed, but you better at least be thinking through why you're doing what you're doing deliberately. And I think that was an important lesson that I took from that deployment.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And that's a great kind of translatable skill that we'll replug later on when we get to that part of the show. Something that I also use day to day, which is just deliberate decision making for a reason. Obviously, you could be wrong. Obviously, things can happen. So you just adjust, make a new decision, move forward, and keep going accordingly. So totally agree with that. How long was this deployment?
9 months. 9 months, and then I spent 6 months as the battle captain, and then it's kind of a funny story actually. I think at one point, it was a very high stress position, so
sure.
I had not had a day off for 6 months, and the colonel walked in when I was essentially cussing out one of our not cussing out anyone in particular, but going very hard on one of our Iraqi counterparts that it's not the greatest, right? This is just the reality of the world. Not everybody is American. Not everybody thinks, like, the value of life there is very low. They don't value life the same. And it was a situation where there was an ambush going on with some of our Iraqi counterparts, and we were co-located where I was. We had our base, and then we had like a little subsection of the base where I was, where the different Iraqi units would have a colonel basically that would be stationed there, would come every day. And I would meet with them, and I was kind of the liaison to the Iraqis, and they're getting ambushed, and I needed intelligence, and I go to this guy and I say, hey, like, your guys are getting ambushed. I need coordinates. I need to know what's going on so I can call an air support. And he just looks at me and he says, well, let me finish my tea. And at that point I was about 6 months in, and it really pissed me off, as you can imagine. And so I remember that, I'm going off about this, and the colonel calls in and he just grabs me on the shoulder. He's like, I think you need a break, son. So
good call.
But it was kind of a reward. They made him an XO of one of their companies, which at the time, just timeline wise, I wasn't really going to be slotted to be an XO. So they said, we're going to move you to XO, and so I moved to XO, and then I kind of forgot. I apologize. I forgot the beginning of the question. What was the original question?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, it was the time frame. So I guess that's 3 more months in the role of XO there.
Yeah, all right. So I did XO for 2 more months, and in that role I became the rear detachment commander of that company. So my company commander stayed, so I actually came back a month early. So my full deployment was 8 months. And because I had taken over, I was like basically the second in command for that company. I became the rear D commander. So you don't just leave all at once. It's kind of a phased withdrawal. So I took basically was the acting company commander back in garrison at Fort Campbell while he was still waiting to come back.
And what was that shift like for you, like on a, literal, like a day-to-day kind of a feeling, both mentally, physically?
Yeah, I mean, I think the job is very different, right? We're talking, I'm now going to training meetings and talking about logistics and what we're going to train when we get back versus, calling in airstrikes on ISIS guys who are ambushing our Iraqi counterparts. So it's a different job, very much so. Still an important job, but not I could take a break here and there. I could go to the gym when I wanted to, or it was definitely a more relaxed position. But then coming back into garrison, I mean, being an XO, I think is one of the hardest working positions as an officer. You're, the company commander is leading the company and making decisions, but you're sort of like, I think of it as like the offensive coordinator, right? Like you've got the head coach who might pick the play, but you're coming up to them with like, here are all the options, and you're doing all the work to kind of get to that point. So as an XO of company, you're dealing with the logistics, the signal, the everything else, operations, and just trying to support that company commander and just keep the company running so he's free to just make the difficult decisions and do the stakeholder management, represent us to the unit, that sort of thing.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. So coming to the end of this deployment, if there's anything else you want to add there, please do. Otherwise, we could talk about, shifting back, I guess, stateside.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only other thing that ultimately will relate to probably what we'll talk to here is the threshold. I think it really broke a ceiling for me because most people will never go 6 months without a day off. It was a 13-hour shift. There was an hour, 30 minutes before and after your shift for the handoff for the next person. I was the daytime battle captain. There was a nighttime battle captain. But at the end of those 6 months, I mean, I knew so much about my job and that province. That's really not that long of a time. And so I think when I started my company, I mean, my idea of what hard work was much higher now. Like I realized, like, okay, you can physically work every single day for 6 months and you'll be all right. You'll survive.
Right.
So until you've been through that, a lot of people would think that that's insane. And I think to build a successful construction company, I mean, you got to pretty much damn near do. I mean, you can do it on a different timeline, but I guess to be where we are at BR Systems and not even 4 years, I mean, it's required kind of a similar level of focus and work that I'm not sure I'd be able to mentally have done had I not had that experience in deployment.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely tracks. Makes sense. What I always like to, to I guess create relativity or relatable kind of examples. If you did 10 push-ups for a week, on day 8, 9, you're going to expect to be able to do 12, 15 push-ups. It's the same kind of a thing, right? It was where you're creating that level of pace and capability. So now you understand, you've unlocked that moving forward. So totally tracks. Yeah. Coming back, I guess, at the end of the deployment, I'm guessing you come back to the States, or do you go somewhere else in between?
Yeah, no, just came back and I was in that XO position. So then it was just, back to getting everybody back, took a little break, and then just start training and running the company. So
well, yeah. So then where does Engineer Corps come in that timeline?
Yeah, so after I think I did another, I think it was about 9 months as an XO, and then I was selected to go to Captain's Career Course, which you do before you take command of a company. So I got promoted to captain, but then before you can take command, you go to Captain's Career Course. So have actually boxes packed at my house. I've committed to staying. I think it's about 3 more years is what you would end up. So I was at the 4-year mark by going to Captain's Career Course and everything else. I was basically committing to staying the 8 years, and my goal was to stay in and take command. And then we had the pandemic, and they basically, the Pentagon sent out a letter saying nobody's moving anywhere. So I had to go back to Fort Leonard Wood for Captain's Career Course, and so literally boxes packed at my house. I was ready to leave, and they're like, nope, you're just going to sit there. So I, at that point, really didn't have a job. So I became a non-essential. So I kind of just sat at my house for, like a month and a half. And taught me a lot about retirement. I can never retire because got very depressed, and
Yeah.
I didn't have any, I was just sitting there, and
Yeah.
you'd think it'd be really nice, but it got old pretty quick. And so I just was, finally they reach out to me and they say, hey, you're not going to go to the next class, right? We're going to actually move you back a year group because we've already filled up all the future classes, right? You just missed your date because half my class made it.
Yeah.
I just hadn't moved yet. I mean, had I moved the week prior, I would have made it. But so with that, it's like, not that I'm the, best thing since sliced bread, but I was highly rated in my time. I had really good,
Sure. Yeah.
evaluations, and I had worked really hard to earn those. And I'm thinking now, I've worked so hard. Now I'm going to actually be behind my peers career wise.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty demoralizing. I think I felt sorry for myself for a week, and then I just, kind of was like, well, I'm gonna do what I can. So I called HRC and said, hey, like, this is my situation. Like, I know I've committed to staying, but can I get out? And they're like, yes, please get out. Like, we don't know what to do with you. And, it's not a great thing, right? Like, you would think they would have looked at maybe who I was and my, OERs and be like, maybe we should try to retain this guy. But no, you're just a number at the time. And like, okay, well, and they said, like, we won't, because a lot of what they used to do is if you were getting out, they would actually PCS you your last year to kind of like deter you from getting out. Like, hey, we're going to send you to somewhere probably not great to spend your last year. And they even said, like, yeah, we won't even PCS you. Just stay at Fort Campbell and, just spend your last year, and then you can get out, and we'll allow it. So before I went to the battalion commander to tell him I was getting out, I actually called the deputy commander of the Corps of Engineers in Nashville, and he didn't know me, but I kind of just told him my story and said, hey, I'm looking to get experience before I get out. Like, is there any way I can come work for you? And he's like, well, I mean, we don't have a billet for you, so if you want to stay on the books at Fort Campbell, I'd be happy to have you. And so I just sent him a memorandum of understanding to sign saying, like, I would stay at Fort Campbell in my unit, but then go work for him. And, my battalion commander, he had given me his #1 rating as, we had a really good relationship because we had deployed together. And then, I'd worked really hard for him during that deployment. And so, we had a really good rapport. And he basically looked at ambush and said, sir, I want to get out of the Army. And on one hand, here's my, refrat packet to get out, and here's a memorandum of understanding to go work for the Corps of Engineers. And he signed both right there. And so then I went and spent my last time working for the Corps, and really just got spent a lot of my time working on my transition. It was a much lower pace there than it was. I mean, it was essentially the Corps of Engineers is mostly a civilian organization. I think the National Corps had something like 350 people, and I was one of 5 green suiters in the Army that were part of that organization. So civilian government organization during pandemic, there's a lot of downtime. So which was great for, I was researching what am I going to do after this. So, looking at Vanderbilt's MBA program, I actually wanted to do medical technology was kind of one of the things I was looking at. And with systems engineering, I was really into, maybe like going and designing prosthetics and that sort of thing. And I just had a guy call me. He was the former commander of the Chicago District Corps of Engineers, a colonel who was retiring out. And he had called my commander, just asked him, he's like, hey, I'm getting recruited to this company to basically build a government contracting team for construction. Do you have any, high performers that you can recommend? And so I got connected with him, and he called me, and I just told him, I was like, well, I want to, I think I want to do medical technology. And he's like, oh, we're going to be building hospitals and clinics. And 3 gas stations later, I never built a hospital or clinic with him. I did ultimately go work for him, and that's what got me into construction. So he sold me on going and doing construction, and so I left. I did something that's actually probably pretty interesting. There's a program that's called Hiring Our Heroes, where I got to do 3 months while I was still in the Army as an internship. So it's kind of like I knew I was going to work for them. So I basically got a 3-month head start where I didn't have to burden their budget. The Army was still paying me. And that was great because when I got to go and negotiate my position salary, I had 3 months of experience. Be like, hey, look what I've done in 3 months. Like, this is what I'm worth to the company. But yeah, I went there, and because this was a because it was a new branch of, so the company itself was about $100 million a year company, but their bread and butter was like, and I don't want to jump too far over, but their bread and butter was like, McDonald's would say, hey, we want to renovate 300 stores across the country. They would go in, use their proprietary survey technology and everything to evaluate the construction requirements, and then go hire 300 general contractors across the country and then manage the program holistically. And when they went to the government and said, hey, we want to be your construction manager, they looked at their resume and said, you guys have never really built anything. You're not really a general contractor. You're a construction manager or program manager. We want our construction managers to have general contracting experience. So that was the whole endeavor to like start their government contract, like build a at-risk construction branch of the company to specifically go after government contracting.
So before,
yeah. So go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I want to take a step back though before we get too deep into civilian career. First of all, that's like a wild thing to come back from deployment. Then pandemic happens and everyone's just kind of like sitting around, no idea what's going on. How did you kind of, I don't know, like get over the feeling sorry? Because I mean, it's really a tough situation to find yourself in.
Yeah, it's funny. It took me all the way to the end of my career. I think a lot of times you think, in the Army, it's like you think you don't really have control, but just because it's a government organization, I mean, it's still people, right? It's still people. I mean, if a commander likes you or somebody, I mean, really, and I talk to people in retrospect now that are still in, like, hey, like, don't be a victim of your own career. I mean, take control, send an email, do something. But I think at the time it was kind of a long shot. I was just really depressed. And I was like, man, I feel like I'm losing, control of my career. Like, let me just see what I can do. And my roommate at the time had worked for the Corps of Engineers. He was actually a Build It position where he went and spent like 6 months, as kind of I forget what they called it, but it was a program in the Army after your opportunity or time that you could go do. And so he knew the deputy commander. So he gave me his contact and was like, hey, why don't you go? Yeah, I actually don't remember exactly how it came up, but I think I just kind of asked him like, hey, can you hook me up with this guy or who is there? What's the situation? You think there's any feasibility of me going to work there? And he definitely helped me out on that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like foresight, because when you're in that situation, you don't necessarily, I think most people don't think about one is, transition and how I'm going to get into a civilian career, or two, even like, just recognize to network essentially internal to military, right? You don't necessarily think about it as being that kind of structure. So it's really cool to hear that, you did have the headspace wherewithal to do that, especially in that time frame. And I think that's a weird time frame. So cool to hear you got through it. Get into Engineer Corps. Something I never understood, but I think you clarified is I guess it's mostly civilian and just some military representation.
Yeah, so the commander and the deputy commander are always Army guys, and then the basically every department head is a civilian position. So it's kind of funny. It's almost like the bureaucracy of the executive branch of the government. Like they just have to wait out for the next president, right? And it's kind of the same thing in the Corps of Engineers, right? You have the commander coming through who's always like got his intent and hey, this is how we're going to do things, but he's going to be gone in 3 years. It's going to be somebody else, but you're going to still be there, right? And that was kind of the same culture there. Was these were very established people that kind of worked their way up, and it was a civilian government organization, very much so, a very good one, I think, relative to some of the other ones, but still a civilian government organization, very bureaucratic.
Sure. Yeah. Really interesting. I never, that was something I was always curious to understand. So glad to have you here clarify it. And then when you went from that position to supporting, I'm not sure like how to reference it or call it, kind of like where you segued next. What was that called?
Like the Hiring Our Heroes internship.
Was there something in between, like where, that person had recruited you? I think you said it was a captain had recruited you to, potentially build hospitals.
Yeah. So he was the commander of the Chicago district, but he was retiring out. So he had already given up his position, and he is like fully retiring out of the Army. So he actually was still in the Army and just had already kind of negotiated his position at this company and was just waiting to take it fully. So he started recruiting his team sort of ahead of time. So Um, when he called me, like he was not actually at that company yet. He's like, hey, this is what I'm
Oh,
doing,
I
and I'm
see.
building my team. Yeah.
Oh,
So it was
purely
just
for
something
civilian purpose.
yeah, yeah, it was just his next
Oh, okay,
next
gotcha,
thing, his next
gotcha.
endeavor after he was retiring the army. So
Yeah, yeah,
this was
okay,
he had been recruited to this company to start this new branch of the company, and was trying to build a team around himself. So
okay, yeah, gotcha. So I guess before going there, you did that internship, hiring our heroes. How did you even know to find that opportunity?
good question. I think the Army has done a pretty good job at, when you start to transition out, they give you some information about like, hey, here are different programs. It was called there's a great umbrella I think called CSP, which is Career Skills Programs, and it was
Mhm.
just listed as one of them. And I just called the lady that was representing it, and she explained sort of what it was and how it worked. And I was like, okay, this would be a good fit. And then I actually called, at that point I'd already sort of negotiated to go work for this company. So I called him and told him, I said, hey, I might be able to come work 3 months early for you
Mhm.
by this program. He's like, great. And so I helped them get involved with it. And I was their first intern, and they actually still use the program now. They take
Mhm.
military interns from it. I have too. I've actually brought in two employees from the program since starting my company as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I think those programs are so critical to take advantage of because it just really lets you do exactly what it's there for, which is integrate into civilian world and life. So in transitioning out, curious, to touch on, I guess at this point, unless we miss anything, is transition period military to civilian.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only other relevant thing that I'd like to point out, I guess, is that I did start to see what ultimately inspired. I knew from young age I always want to start my own company at some point. I didn't know what that was going to be, but one of the things that clicked, because I also, when I was getting out, I interviewed for some engineer positions from other companies.
Mm-hmm.
But as I was looking around at the Corps of Engineers and who was doing this contracting, there were lots of young engineers and architects and no young builders
Mm-hmm.
at all, especially in the government contract space. I mean, every contractor who, the owners themselves were, 55 years and older.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see a single young man who was, representing his company, going after these government contracts that were going out. And I just saw a need. And I was like, man, like I could go be an engineer or I could be a builder,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not going to have any competition. I mean, there's no young men doing this. So I think that was an important thing that I saw while I was at the Corps of Engineers for sure.
Yeah, that's really neat. So taking that, segueing us into civilian life. So talk to us about that transition, what that was like for you.
Yeah, I think one nice thing was that I was going to go work for a retired colonel.
Mm-hmm.
So the our subculture within this corporation was very conducive to like coming from the military. So
Mm-hmm.
the transition itself was pretty smooth. And I think more so than any other industry, I mean, construction is like very culturally similar to the Army. I mean, you have a bunch of, your superintendents and foremen are your NCOs, your project managers and project engineers, stuff are kind of your officers. Um, and then you have a bunch of young men that are not necessarily in a place that they're from, right? That are there
Mm-hmm.
working. I mean, just like privates that are stationed, somewhere. They're varying levels of education and backgrounds, and so I think culturally, it was not a shock to me. I think the only thing that was more that the company I went to work for was pretty corporate culture, um, which I didn't appreciate, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I had a hard time with it, which is, at the time I was there, I had told them during the interview that I intended to start my own company at some point, but it would be in the far future, 5 to 10 years in the future. But I was only with them for a year and a half before I said, all right, I think I can cut through a lot of the red tape that I thought they were creating for themselves. And it was, again, I'm very grateful to that company. They gave me a massive opportunity. So it's not to
Mm-hmm.
disparage them in any way. But it was still a corporation. And
Right.
again, talking about like trying to change things and everything else. I mean, we were just a lot of times, I just felt like after a while, we were a startup within an existing corporation.
Mm-hmm.
So their culture did not support the fast moving nature of being a general contractor. And,
Yeah.
I remember I went to, we had one of our first jobs that I'd gotten. They were used to contracting a general contractor to do their build out. So they had like an 800-page contract, and I needed a roofer to do $8,000 worth of scope of this project, and I needed 20 contracts done, to mobilize in a month. And they're like, we can do like one a week.
Mm-hmm.
We're not set up to do this. And so there's a lot of just grinding gears and trying to be successful, despite not really having the support. And then, in construction, you're very much, I was a project manager there. So it's like, I'm pulling up my project, my project tracker and showing like, this person's hung their time on it and this person, and I'm looking like I've gotten zero value for thousands and thousands of dollars of overhead that is being hung on my job. Like, how am I going to compete against these small, fast moving general contractors, which is who we were trying to compete with at the time. And I think I just, after a while, I thought, you know what, and I was doing a lot, because we were kind of a new endeavor. I had a lot of responsibility, being sort of that startup within a company. And I was like, I think if I can do it here, I can do it on my own. And just gave me the courage, and it was a great experience. I mean, again, very grateful. I made a lot of mistakes working with somebody else's money, and I'm glad that they were willing to give me that opportunity. So again, not to disparage them at all, but I think it was a point where I was like, and also start thinking about the idea of having kids in the future. And I was like, I don't want to have no income and be in a startup and also have a newborn baby. So I think it just shortened my timeline to start my company. And I took the leap of faith after a year and a half working for them. So
yeah, that's awesome. And, I don't think there's any like right or wrong, more so just a personal or, just the way you like to do things in the sense of entrepreneurship or corporate. There's obviously an in between, but if you're at a corporate place and you're an entrepreneur at heart, that's obviously going to clash, or vice versa. Right. So yeah, it's not like a right or wrong, but I totally could understand what you're saying. Before we move into, you started your company, want to just plug in transition period. And, I do think you kind of laid out the groundwork of what you would recommend, but I want to just, provide the opportunity to really plug it to highlight, looking in hindsight, how you would recommend for other service members to transition military to civilian life.
Yeah, one thing I'll say is a really, really good piece of advice that I got after I was out. And there was a guy that actually it's called UV. I'll give him a plug. It's called UV sunscreen, but he developed a sunscreen that could be seen under UV light, right? And I met him at the West Point Entrepreneurship Conference, and this was after being, I guess, about a year in business for myself. I went to this conference, and he had just got out of the Army, and he already had a fully patented product, and he was trying, he's worked with manufacturers trying to get this thing developed. And I was just talking to him, just really impressed with what he was doing. And I asked him, I said, like, how did you get all this done? And he was like, I just set a rule for myself that every day when I come home, I'm going to do one thing that helps me in my civilian life after I get out of the Army. And whether it's send an email, read an article, work on my formula, like he said, every day he would do at least one thing. And it could be a very small thing, but in the span of his 5-year career, it added up to him like developing a fully patented product, having investors, all these things while he was still in the Army. And I've given that advice out a lot to people of, even if you're going to get out, even if you're going to stay in for 20 years, that's still a very short period of your life. When it's all said, you're going to have a lot of life when you get out of the military. So I think my biggest advice is, don't wait till you're 6 months out. I think that, doing that exact thing, just one small thing every day, whether, again, read a couple pages of a book that, whatever it is, I think doing that would really set you up for success when you get out.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. First time I heard that thought process. And I think, really, why not? Like it can't hurt. It'll only help you in the future for what will, to your point, right, be the majority of your life. Yeah, that's really cool. And good for that person. Good for your friend that. Pretty amazing to come out and have a patent product. So that's great.
Yeah, yeah, it's doing very well.
Awesome. So talk to us about, where we paused was you starting your company. Talk to us about what that, literal period of that, like, initial leap. What was that like? How did you go from, 0 to 100?
Yeah, yeah. I think I was very, very naive. Thank God, because I don't think I would have
Yeah.
done it.
Right. Right, exactly.
Every yeah, I think every entrepreneur has some level of ignorance that gives them hope,
Hmm.
right? It's like, oh,
Yeah,
this is going to
right.
be great. You get into it and you realize that it doesn't really matter what you're doing. Starting a business and being an entrepreneur is very difficult. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter what industry, what product. You're going to have constant challenges and really test yourself. But one of the things that I did, so while I was with that company, I was part of one of the other business lines was doing this project management. So even though I was on the general contracting side, I just was geographically adjacent to a Pizza Hut. That was one of their clients, and I was the construction manager helping Pizza Hut with this. And they had a general contractor, and he was about 2 hours away from me, but just truly a small business. I mean, this guy, he
Hmm.
was doing everything himself, just really. I mean, and yeah, I think it just at the time, because I didn't know any better, I thought that our big company had all this knowledge of construction. Like this corporation is like, we are, I'm dealing with these small subcontractors, and um, I was just very ignorant to think that like they're the ones that can learn from us, the big corporation. And really, what I found is like these small business owners are the most impressive, most knowledgeable people in our industry.
Hmm.
And I saw this guy and just how he was able to move, and he would have ran circles around us on any job. If we ever had to compete with him, his overhead was so low,
Hmm.
and he was just, he could just make moves and make stuff happen. And it was so different from, me being part of this corporation and having constraints and forms and report. I mean, half of my week was just reporting to higher ups. I wasn't actually, moving the project forward, right? But this guy he didn't answer to anybody. He was just
Right.
out there making stuff happen. So I just, I had some credibility because I had worked with him on this project. I just called him and said, hey, I'm starting this company. Can I come work for you essentially as a 1099 project manager?
Cool.
Um,
Hmm.
so he paid me through my LLC
Hmm.
that I had started, and I got to go deliver projects under his company, but then use that as past performance for my company because he was
Mm.
paying me as an LLC. I had my own insurance, everything. I would buy my material. There's certain small pieces of scope that I would take. Then I would take it. And one of my first projects was a bank renovation. And again, having come from the military, I didn't have a construction background. So I was learning. And when I was at my first company, I mean, I had to get on a plane to go see my projects. They're all over the country.
Hmm.
And so I'm like getting calls from people describing problems in the field, very little construction experience. I'm looking at YouTube, I'm reading books, I'm like doing all these things. But without being physically there every single day, it was
Yeah.
very difficult to learn. And
Hmm.
this is when it really started to click because I renovated this bank and I actually did a lot of the carpentry myself.
Mm.
And I'm not a carpenter. I had a lot of rework, and luckily, it was kind of a lump sum thing. But so I paid for all my mistakes. But
Mm.
but it was the first time I finally realized like, okay, like this is how it was like a full gut of this bank. And I realized like, okay, this is how a building is put together, commercial building. And I saw all of the innards and all the components of this building by ripping out all the walls, reframing it. And um, I think the actual technical side started to click. And,
Mm.
um, as a general contractor, you don't have to be able to do everything yourself, but you have to know what right looks like. And you have to
Yeah.
like know the components of construction. You have to know, and, you know, anybody in this industry knows that there's more than you could ever learn, right, in a
Hmm.
lifetime when it comes to construction. But I think that first experience was like, okay, I now kind of understand start to finish how a construction project or how a commercial building is put together. And then, that first year, I basically I did like 105,000, right? That was what I got paid. I was just a single person working for myself, no employees.
Hmm.
I started with about $20,000. I mean, I'll just tell you, I don't know, I don't want to go on a rant, but I'll tell you. So I had from deployment and everything else, I'd saved up about 80,000, and I think I actually put 5,000 in my checking account for the business account to start. But then anything that he paid me, right, any money that I made, I put in that account, and I didn't actually take a paycheck for 2 years. So I stretched that 80,000 to survive for 2 years, and I was getting paid very well at the company before that. So I'm sure we'll get to it, but there's a lot of a lot of strain on the marriage, everything else when you're taking 2 years of no pay, having come from a really good six-figure salary. My wife didn't have to pay for anything at the time, right? I took all the bills, everything, and before I did that, I had to basically say, hey, you have to take over the mortgage, and I'm going to do what I can to help split utilities and other bills, but I don't know what's going to happen, right? Like I'm going to do my best with this thing, but I don't know how long it's going to take before I can even pay myself. But I definitely had a strong vision for what I want to do, and just from my past experience. So, I knew I was trying to go after some pretty big fish, and I was going to need a lot of capital to do it. So, yeah, I went as long as I physically could, until I had basically no money left, and I started paying myself in the beginning of year 3. That's when I took my first paycheck.
Wow.
So yeah, for those who are thinking about starting, one of the biggest pieces of advice I give, and it is probably the number one reason I was able to do it, is you have to have, if you're married, you have to have your wife's support. I mean, if your wife is not 100% in it with you, you're probably not going to be able to do it, and it's going to put a lot of strain on your marriage. Even if she is 100%. I mean, I'll tell you, at the end of year 2, she started asking, like, all right, when is this thing going to hit? We had to live a very, very modest lifestyle to, live on only her income, basically. So, it was a lot of sacrifice for sure. And of course, not only are you not making any money, but I was working the most I'd ever worked. I was working nonstop. So there's that side too of, you've got no money and you have no time. So it's not the most glorious thing to be a business owner all the time. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely not. And I mean, that's pretty, I'll say, typical to anyone who's trying to make something happen, but also just awesome to hear. When did you make that switch from working for that GC you had connected with right in that kind of transition phase? And also, by the way, awesome way to do that, in terms of, calling him, getting a job, learning, and then moving on from there. So it's really like what you built. I'm just thinking about it as you mentioned, is you kind of built yourself a roadmap that was like almost perfect, right? You learned from a corporate type environment, then you segued off into learning from a small business GC while also starting your own business and then segueing into yours. Where did that kind of like flip happen from that working for that GC into what you're doing today?
Yeah, it was about, so I started the company in I think I started officially in February, but I went to work for him in March of, I guess, 2022. And I would say by November, we were pretty much ready to split paths. So I had got a couple awards on my own as a subcontractor that I needed to go deliver. So I got a U.S. Foods renovation. And again, there's a lot of bloody stories I could tell you on this, but some of my first couple projects did not go well, right? The bank was difficult in itself, but I had his support. But at that point, right, it's just me. I bid a U.S. Foods to a general. I didn't have a general contracting license yet, and so I kind of gave him a turnkey price to bid to deliver this project underneath them. And so we did that in December of that year. Did great. Everybody's happy. They decided they weren't going to pay me any of the money. So it cost me, so of the money I had earned, it was about, I think I had, I said 105,000. So I had 105,000 in the account. And then, well, some of that had paid for material. So realistically, I probably only had like 75, 80 actually in that account. And it cost $60,000 to do this bathroom renovation of actual costs, material and labor. And I didn't get paid for 6 months because I had to file a lien, all that stuff. First job.
Was there an issue with the project, or they were just holding out for no reason?
What many general contractors do, they were robbing Peter to pay Paul. So they were upside down, and they took the money from the client and then paid off their past subs.
Right.
So I didn't get paid until they had got another job.
Right.
And stole money from that job to pay
Right.
me, basically. But I ended up just contacting, I got the architect and be like, hey, just so you know, like I'm putting a lien on the building, all this stuff. So he was very good. He worked with me. Cost them a lot more money than 60,000. So they had 5 more of these things lined up. They lost all of them.
Wow.
The US Foods, they're not working for US Foods anymore. Yeah, so that was project 1 on my own.
That's a way to start.
I had just hired a couple 1099 guys I had met in the area. And, just a couple good old boys, honestly. They weren't even really commercial guys. They just, this guy's a carpenter, this guy does this. And I said, hey, come with me, come do this renovation. And actually, the one guy was cutting grass. That was his. He was like, came up and was advertised as grass cutting company. He's like, I also do handyman stuff. And he gave me his card. And I called him. I was like, hey, can you install doors and whatever? So we had to do doors. And, so that was the first job. And then the second job was a Range USA retail. And same thing. I had bid all the carpentry packages as sub. And this job went horribly. It was supposed to be 3 months. It took them like 8 months to get it done. And I had, again, another lesson learned. I had basically signed up to install a bunch of GC provided material, but they were incredibly incompetent. And so that material did not ever show up. So there was just multiple deployments back to the job site. Like, hey, we got these doors now, come install. Hey, we got these bathroom accessories that are ordered to the wrong size and all this stuff. But I was not getting paid I would show up and it would all be wrong. And, I was paying people too. So I was, I was kind of administrator. I was trying to not be the one out there installing it. But at this time, of course, I had to still go out there and do a lot of work myself, just because I didn't have the money to pay to have turnkey. But I was still paying these guys for the day. They showed up and the stuff wasn't ready and they weren't compensating me for it. And it got stretched out to like 8 months. And they went through 3 superintendents. They kept firing them. And it was a nightmare. So, one of the things that you realize when you're starting, at least from my experience, was the people that will give you an opportunity with no past performance are the ones that nobody else will work for.
Yeah.
So that's why these contractors were giving me a shot, because they couldn't get anybody else. Their reputations, they were not competent. So they were getting these jobs, but they were not. They're having a hard time getting them covered. It's like, what the hell? We'll give BR Systems a shot. I mean, they don't have any experience, but what do we have to lose? So. I think it just goes to one of the realities of business of, you're going to go through these challenges, and part of business, a big part of it's just, grinding into submission. Who do you want to work with? Who do you want to work for? Who do you want to work for you? And a lot of trial and error. And, whether it's your subcontractors or owners or whatever, I mean, you're going to have some really good experiences, some really bad experiences. And, you're going to learn from both. But, ideally, the longer you're in business, you surround yourself with winning team members, but that just takes time. I mean, you can't do that overnight, right? There's no way I would know who's going to perform, who's not, until I try and experiment. And I think entrepreneurship in general is a lot of really just taking risk and collecting data. So you're going to take a shot here, do what you think is right. Okay, that didn't work, and you're taking that data and then you're refining and you're trying a different way. And that can, again, that's not only who your subcontractors are, but also your customers. Some customers are going to be terrible, and they're going to make it very difficult to be successful. And so you find new customers.
So how did you, in this trajectory, how did you keep finding new clients and then kind of, growing and adapting accordingly?
Yeah. So there's a website called Building Connected that's free for subcontractors. So I was basically just sending bids, and a lot of the barrier of entry to running your own business is being able to estimate. So I think I had a natural ability to do it, even though I didn't have a lot of construction experience. Ironically, I talked about how I got the highest grade in that class at West Point. That class was systems dynamics. The premise of that class was taking basically real life situations and creating mathematical models to model them. Like one of our projects would be, like, there's a SARS outbreak in Taiwan, create a model that, basically uses these different variables, whether it's, your ability to quarantine, medicine, whatever, and then build the mathematical model and then use it to write a policy paper on what decisions they should make to contain this disease. That was like one project, and you'd have a project every week due.
Mm-hmm.
But I just had a natural ability to kind of build mathematical models that fit, real life situations. So like that's really all estimating is, right? You're doing simple equations to figure out like what's it going to cost to put drywall up, right? What's it going to cost to frame this wall up? So I think I had a little bit of a natural ability to do it, but then a lot of it was just reading drawings and being very scared all the time and bidding stuff and losing a lot. I mean, I went the other way. I bid stuff way too expensive in the beginning because I was scared. And it took me a while to, I might win like 1 out of 20,000, right? I was just pushing these estimates out and really simple estimates like framing, drywall, in retrospect now. But I was just using Building Connect to find these jobs and bidding them. And then, the very few that I would win, I would, go find people to do them with me. And, but by year 2, I hired my first couple employees, like W-2. And so, that year 2, the beginning, I hired basically a carpenter, and then I hired more of like a superintendent type, and then I hired an estimator. And it was just, but again, I was, in the beginning, you're doing HR, you're doing payroll, you're doing, I did all my own books, all my accounting. Like I didn't know anything about accounting, but one thing I did know is that I'm not going to trust somebody to just do all the right things when it comes to the books. And I think that's a good lesson for everybody. Like, don't just blindly outsource your accounting. So because I didn't have the knowledge, I just made it committed. It's like, hey, the first year I'm going to do all my own books and learn, I use QuickBooks. I say, I'm going to learn how to use QuickBooks. I'm going to learn, charts of accounts and accounting best practices. And, but eventually I outsourced it and got a part-time bookkeeper. And now I have a CFO, but I know enough where I can audit the books and see if money's missing or whatever. And I've had, again, another horror story, but I've had embezzlement and things happen in the company. So, a lot has happened in 3.5 years.
Yeah.
But our big, so year 2, our big breakout project was, we got a large senior living. It was like 197 units, and I converted them to apartments, and that was, you just keep telling stories if you want, but basically, I had been, I saw this on Building Connected. I kept meeting with these people. They were a big general contractor. I was working with this developer out of New York. The general contractor was out of Boston, and it was right here in Tennessee near me. It was a local job, but I'd had they kept flying in and they want to meet with me, and we were discussing the scope and all these things. And so then I finally, they kept revising the scope and asking for updated bids. And, about 5-6 iterations later, they're like, okay, like this is final bids, whatever. And I didn't hear anything. And so I call them and, probably like 3-4 weeks later, I'm like, hey, like, what's the status of this? They're like, oh, we've already awarded all this stuff. Like, who are you? I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, BR Systems, you guys have met with me multiple times, but this was the estimator back in Boston. And he's like, oh man, your proposal didn't get put into my stack. I didn't even see it.
Oh my God.
And I'm just like, all right, well, I was like, what have you not bought out? So that's how it started. And it ended up being, like doors, cabinets, like concrete, like all this like miscellaneous stuff that I just picked up. And
that's awesome.
So it ended up being about $500,000 contract, which is great because I was 1 month out. I had hired these guys. I had 1 month left of pay before, and I was not paying myself. Keep that in mind. So this is all the money I've worked to like build up was just trickling out because I had no work, and I got this job, and I ended up using. So all of our systems are not all, but the majority are based off Smartsheet, and I went in and basically surveyed this building, walked through every room, created a Smartsheet that showed like, here's what the drawings show, here are the existing conditions, here's what work needs to be done, here's the price to do the work. And I bought myself another $700,000 of scope. And so it ended up ending about $1.2 million contract.
Wow.
And they adopted our system. I mean, I created a dashboard for them to use to track all the rooms. They shared that with the owner, this developer. So they built a lot of credibility with them. So they were very happy with us. And that money gave me the ability to kind of launch and some breathing room and hire a few employees and really launch us into year 3. That was our, so.
Yeah, that's an insane story because the inflection point of that story was you called to see status the person told you, I don't even know who you are. And then you shifted that into what launched your company essentially. That is wild.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, there's a lot of, it's never easy. It's never easy, and there's a reason not a lot of people do it, right?
Yep.
Owning a business, right? Um, yeah. I mean, I don't want to become a philosopher here, but one of the things that one of the things that I guess helps me sleep at night, right? And because there's been so many times where we've been almost out of business in the last
Mm-hmm.
2.5 years, right? I mean, first, I bootstrapped this thing, so it's not like we had a ton of money
Mm-hmm.
to spend while we're building up capacity or anything like that. And one of the things that I realized is, you know, I took that first year and a half, right, working for that company, great experience. 6 months of being my own business owner. I mean, you learn 10 times. I mean, running your own business, you're going to learn so much. Not only that,
Yep.
but, networking and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nobody can take away the knowledge and the relationships that you build as an entrepreneur. So even
Mm-hmm.
if, I think one of your biggest fears as entrepreneurs, you're going to do all this work and you have nothing to show for it, right? You're just going
Mm-hmm.
to fail at 4 years. You have no money and your life is just kind of passed you by. But if I had to build today what took me 3.5 years to build, I still have all the knowledge and all the relationships. I mean, it would take me a couple of
Yep.
months to build what took me 3.5 years.
Yep.
So it's never a waste, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
never a waste. And I think one of the big fears, like I said, is that you're just going to fail, but you're not really failing. You're basically paying for hard-earned knowledge, and you're increasing your ability to earn.
Mm-hmm.
And again, another good story here, but one of the things that I didn't realize early on is like the sales cycle in construction is extremely long, right?
Mm-hmm.
And networking, everything else. I mean, you're making efforts that you have no idea if they're going to pay off. And
Yep.
and I knew, I wanted to get into the government contracting side, and I basically went to this Corps of Engineers training that was for a quality control manager, which is a position that the owner of a company cannot hold, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing this training really just a network. I just knew that there'd be a bunch of a bunch of government contractors there.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to this thing, and like every coffee break, I'm just like passing out cards and networking. And I remember leaving there after 3 days of wasting my life. Like, this was such a freaking waste of time. Like, this was stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And 7 months later, one of those contractors called me and said, "Hey, we won this big program at Fort Campbell. Aren't you near there? Can you bid these carpentry packages?" And at this point, it's now like a $3.2 million program that
Mm-hmm.
I just from passing out cards, I think. So it took 7 months, and I can't believe he had my card.
Yeah.
But I think the lesson is just, every day for those 7 months, I was getting out and doing more, networking and running the jobs and running around. And, every day for 2 years, basically, I felt like a failure. I mean, I really did. I had no money, couldn't pay myself, just barely keeping my employees paid.
Mm.
But again, it just took a long time to see the
Sure.
fruits of my labor. And,
Yep.
just again, you never know what's going to happen. And, but nobody has a crystal ball, but had I known that at the time, right, like I'd have
Of
a lot less
course.
stress going through that. But at the time, it was just horribly stressful and, scary, and you don't have a crystal ball. But I think, it's just those kind of battle scars that you get over time
Mm-hmm.
that allows you to, become a more stoic entrepreneur and control your emotions and know, like, hey, you just do the things that you know are right.
Yeah.
And that's all you can do, and work hard. And the rest is kind of up to God to say, are you going to get this opportunity? You're going to get this big project or what have you. But, it's really been a pretty wild experience.
Yeah. I mean, you did a great job of explaining the ins and outs of what it means to go through the grind of entrepreneurship, not knowing what's going to hit, what's not, what is a good use of your time, what isn't, learning what isn't, and then not doing that moving forward, with what does end up being good use of your time, not even knowing necessarily until a long time later, like you described in that story, with those government contracts. So explain to us, now that it seems like you just gave us the two stories that really allowed you to, push forward with what you're doing today, and your business, how it's evolved. I want to allow you to plug in, specifically what you're doing and what you're tracking toward, like today.
Yeah, I think, we have done, so one of the things we got in pretty good with the state of Kentucky. So I've done,
Mm-hmm.
juvenile detention center, a couple psych wards actually for the state of Kentucky. We're now working for the city of Lexington and doing their transit center and the bus station there. That's our premier project, right? That's the biggest project, single contract I've had. When I say that program at Fort Campbell, that was multiple contracts. That there's, without getting the specifics, it's a contract vehicle that this company's on that they only have access to. So we kind of work as a sub to them. But as a general contractor, one of the things I didn't talk about, year 2 is when I finally applied and got my general contracting license. Yeah, we're working in Lexington. We've got we're on a master service agreement with them now, and we're also on a master service agreement with the University of Kentucky in Lexington. We're working for JLL, who operates all the government buildings in Nashville. And my background, like coming from the government contracting side, one of the things about the government contracting, it's very difficult, and a lot of people don't want to do it. It's just administrative heavy, but I was never afraid of it because that's the world that's kind of how I started, right? Coming from that world. But there's a thing called lowest price technically acceptable. And what that means is if you're technically qualified and your company is set up and meets the metrics, it doesn't matter that you only have 2 years experience. I mean, a 3.5-year-old company for construction is very inexperienced in the world of construction. But we're doing very large projects and very complex projects, because the government's not allowed to tell you no, right? If you're the low bidder, you get it. But we've had, these master service agreements are actually from projects that we were the low bidder and then have created this relationship. And I see an opportunity, and I've, negotiated, hey, for projects that you can just award us without going out competitively, because we've done a good job, we now have these relationships. But the difficult thing is, on the private side, that's one thing that's kind of our big push right now is, how do I get on these bid lists on the private side, right? Because I have a good reputation, I have a good past performance. Now we've done all these projects. I can basically go and say, we've done high risk construction in high risk environments, hospitals and psych wards and detention centers, and I have a past performance and output in it, which gives me credibility. But it is difficult in the beginning as a general contractor to only have 3.5 years experience and expect somebody to let you build a multi-million-dollar building for them. So that's what I'm trying to do right now, is just, leverage our experience and our past performance on the government to try to, get more work on the private side, which, we don't have a ton. Most of our projects have been with the government. So I guess that's kind of where I'm pushing right now.
Sure. Yeah. And that's to say, I guess, if I'm understanding correctly, like moving from, bidding as a trade to bidding as a general contractor.
Yeah. Well, all of our state of Kentucky jobs, everything. So most of our work has been as a general contractor since the second year. So starting in year 3, we started bidding a lot of state work as a general contractor and winning and performing well on it. But yeah, like this year we'll have about 3/4 of our revenue will be as a general contractor. And then, the rest is a subcontractor as a sub in that Fort Campbell program. But, again, part of the problem with being a subcontractor is you don't get to manage the relationship with the owner. The general contractor does. So if that general contractor does a bad job, you're not going to get paid on time. And that's what ultimately was happening. Like I had all these subcontractor jobs that we were just getting paid not on time. And when I was the general contractor, I could control the relationship, make sure we got paid on time, make sure we turned in our paperwork, did everything. So it kind of shifted our strategy to saying, hey, we're just going to primarily work on being a general contractor. So we're just having more success. And, not take my own horn, but, we do a lot better than the general contractors that I work for as a sub. And so I'd rather do that. But there's definitely, again, on the private side, sometimes it's easier to, if you're a 20-year construction company that has a relationship with one of these, brands or whatever, it's just hard to get on the bid list is what I found. Sometimes it's only 3.5-year contractor, but God's been good and we've had a lot of success as a general contractor for the government. So I'm hoping that, that resume will help kind of open some doors here in the near future.
Yeah. I mean, that's, from my perspective, that's what it's all about, is to just continue building up credibility so that you do get the opportunity at some point, hopefully very soon, to, bid on those other jobs, be a part of those other jobs in the private sector. So I want to plug in the opportunity to talk about translatable skills. I know you actually mentioned a lot, like as we were, going through your story, But just, I guess, in particular to highlight, a few that come to mind: military to built environment.
Yeah. I mentioned that half of my staff is military. So early on, I knew that a weakness was that I didn't have a lot of technical skill. So I thought, okay, let me go hire like construction professionals. Um, and it's funny because I would get a 20-year seasoned carpenter a task. I'm like, hey, I need you to go do this task, whatever. I'd get 20 phone calls like, hey, well, do you want, I saw this. Do you want me to do it this way? Do you want me to do this? And then, as people I knew in the military got out and wanted to get in the trades, I had an NCO, that came and worked for me. He's one of my foremen now. And I would take him and say, hey, here's a YouTube video. This is what I need you to do. Boom, boom, boom. I wouldn't get any phone calls.
Yeah.
All right. And one thing that I noticed that's unique to the military is our ability to go into a very like vague situation and be expected to get results and come back with results. Right. So he wasn't, a lot of our civilian counterparts, they just don't have decision-making experience. They're never, you may work your whole life in the civilian world, and at the very end of your career, you might be in charge of 5 people. I was a platoon leader when I was 23, in charge of a 35-person platoon. So you just get, you're going to get squad leader or whatever, even on the enlisted side, doesn't matter. But you have a lot more leadership experience and a lot more confidence to make decisions. And I think that's a very transferable skill set. And again, just the ability to not have everything laid out, not have all the answers, and be expected to get results. I think military people are very much very good at that. Yeah. And that's why I shifted our strategy. I to just hire. It's easier for me to hire someone from the military and teach them construction than to teach a construction professional leadership and decision making.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. So closing out before we get to our last 2 questions, I think we covered everything to date. But if I missed anything or anything else you want to add, please go ahead and do so.
No, I think I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to kind of tell my story here. I think, like I said, one of the things that, I'll just reiterate is that, when I go into these pre-construction conferences for the government, I'm the youngest guy by 20 years. It's very hard what we do, but there's a huge opportunity, and there's not a lot of young men and women getting into this on the building side. Like I said, I've seen a lot of young engineers, architects, but going out, learning trades, learning to be a builder. It's very tough world. You got to have thick skin. You have to have fortitude, but I think in 10 years, legitimately, I'm not going to have any competition. Really. So I would just encourage more people who are willing to endure the pain to come in. And the other thing is, we talk about the world that we're in right now, right? Every industry is being disrupted by AI, but I can tell you right now with confidence, in 20 years, there will still be somebody with knowledge of how a building's put together walking in, telling you how to do your renovation, and people with swinging hammers to get it done. And so I didn't know what was going to happen with AI when I picked this path, but I'm very grateful that I did, because I know I know what the future looks like for this industry, and it's just being able to use your hands to put a building together. And, that's something that I don't expect is going to change greatly anytime soon. So if you're going to commit to learning something that's going to be valuable for the future, that's one thing I know will be valuable in the future.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Being in the tech space for built environment, I get that question all the time, which is, how do you think AI is going to impact the industry? And my response is exactly what you just said. Listen, it's going to hopefully help efficiency on admin, needs, capabilities, understandings, forecasts, whatever on the back end, right? Back end operations. But at the end of the day, we're not even close to a place where, we're going to somehow automate building what you're sitting in right now. So I always make that distinction very clear. I'm not here to pretend like tomorrow I'm going to have a drone build a building. So yeah, I totally agree. Well said. I also very much agree that it'd be awesome, for veterans in particular to get into service members transitioning to get into the built environment for the reasons you just mentioned. Not a lot of competition, so long as you could, withstand those first years of grit of getting through, the hardships of building a business. So really awesome story, man.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. So closing out, we're going to close out with the last 2 questions. We'll start with any book or books you'd like to recommend to the audience.
Yeah, so one of the things when I went into that internship I talked about,
Mm-hmm.
there's a book called Jumpstart Construction Management, and it's very well written. It just lays out the process of construction and the different types of contracting vehicles and what a submittal and an RFI and all these things that, reading the book and then seeing it in real life, I learned so much quicker and I retained
Mm.
it. And a lot of people who are doing it have never actually read like the book answer of like what is the process of construction. So I mean, it
Sure.
just
Yeah.
gave me a really strong base of knowledge to go in and really just retain what I was seeing. Like,
Mm.
it's one thing to see it, it's one thing to read about it, but when you read about it and then you see it, you absorb it and you really
Mm-hmm.
retain it. So I make all my new project managers and project engineers read that within the first 3 months of coming on the company. And I think it's just a great book. And then there's one that's I think it's on pretty much every general contracting license, but it's Carpentry and Building Construction. It's a textbook. It's a
Mm-hmm.
McGraw-Hill textbook, and it just does a very good job of laying out like very basic. If you're going in the industry, like it starts with like these are the different types of power tools, and it'll tell you like, I have a section on paint, and I'll tell you the different types of paints and why an enamel is used on metal or whatever. But it's very basic, and at the end of each one, it shows basic estimating factors and how to
Mm.
estimate. So if you're trying to be, if you wanted to start your own little handyman company, that sort of thing, I think that that's a great textbook to read.
Yeah, great points. I love the point of reading the construction management book, so that you have like a technical or a learned approach that you then could apply to the field. I haven't heard anyone say that, to be honest, and I completely agree. I haven't thought about that myself, and it's a great point. It's a great point.
Very good.
Yeah. All right. Last but not least is your wellness practice. What does that look like for you?
Probably be better. I think. Um, so for me, I mean, working out is a big thing. I think you have to work out. I mean, I think more so than any other period of my life, I feel like how susceptible you are to kind of letting your body go down, right? There's just an
Mm-hmm.
incredible amount of stress. And I mean, I won't lie. I mean, I feel the effects of long-term stress, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not, whether it's, wake up every day with some level of headache or something like that. It definitely has effects on your body. And I think that I think working out is a big piece of it. But also I think giving yourself some grace and knowing like, hey, sometimes you're just going to have like, these things are they come in waves, and
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes you're going to get hit by a wave of like, hey, I just have to work 7 days a week for the next couple of weeks to be successful and do what has to be done to get through this. But it's temporary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to get through it, and then you're going to get some more balance, and okay, let's make sure I'm not missing gym days and that sort of thing, and kind of recovering. But it's going to come in waves. And I think just knowing that, hey, this isn't forever, and
Mm-hmm.
it always helps me get through some of the tougher times. Be like, hey, this is just a period of suffering that I know is temporary, and it'll go away. So I think just having that mindset, and then you got to keep your meat suit healthy here, and work out, and you know I think just it releases, it reduces your cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So there's definitely science behind it, but
Mm-hmm.
it just keeps you moving so that you can deal with the stress. And it is I mean, anybody that's been in this industry for more than a day will tell you it's a very high stress environment, and so you have to be able to manage it.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. Well said. Luke, thanks so much for jumping on the show, for sharing your story, man. Really appreciate it. And I'm very much looking forward to.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build.